Hi, I'm Lee with Sanctuary Family Farms. I'm married to Kai. We have two kids. Eli is coming up on 13, and Kira, our daughter, is about to turn 10. And I am the farmer of the family. A few years back, my brothers and I were helping Paul roof his house one summer. When we work together, we usually have at least one, if not 10, conversations going. Well, I think this was the first time there was some silence, at least for a little while. We must have been giving each other heck as we normally did, which usually meant 2 against 1. I'm suspecting that Jeremiah and I were heckling Chris since he hadn't been married very long. Single brothers always give married brothers the best advice. I think it is brothers' obligation to point out the things that bring out their most internal conflicts and then laugh about it. Oh, you have to ask the wife if you can come hang out. Or, don't worry, dude, she'll get over it. That kind of stuff. It's all fun to give brothers grief until you're the last one to get married. Then you reap what you sow. And you're on the receiving end trying to explain to your wife it didn't really happen the way your brothers are claiming it did. Anyway, we were swinging our hammers away and carrying on like always, and then Paul interrupted the conversation. Now, if you've ever been around Paul, you know pretty quick when he's joking and when he's getting down to business. And this was one of those times we all knew which one it was. He told us that we needed to start taking care of each other, building each other up instead of tearing each other down. To my best memory, it was a truth spoken in a very non-emotional way. There was no anger, manipulation, or direction toward one of us more than the others. In fact, it was a message we all heard loud and clear. Time to grow up. It's time to mature and take responsibility for your actions and not cloak everything as a joke. Time to get serious. Time to learn your actions and attitudes affect others. I don't know why I have been thinking of this story a lot lately. Maybe the hot summer is reminding me of the hard work on that roof, but we've done lots harder jobs than roofing. Maybe it was thinking about the long list of stories we could talk about growing up brigands. Whether we were camping, fishing, hunting, working, inventing, growing families and raising kids, or playing, anything else, there's always funny stories. Stories are good and remind me of lots of good times, but it's more than just stories. It's the message. Is that message still meaningful some 20 years later? I believe God is speaking to all who will hear him. In the book of Revelation, there's a phrase that keeps coming to mind as well. Revelation 3:22, "He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches." Christ is speaking to the 7 churches and is evaluating them. He's telling them what they are doing good and what they're doing bad. It doesn't take a lot to see those same attitudes in churches today. Before I go further, I need to correct my terms from bad to evil. The Bible is the foundation, and everything we allow in our lives that contradicts the Bible is evil, making us and our viewpoints evil as well. Bad is Satan's way to deceive us into thinking that even though our ideas, thoughts, and actions are neither godly nor biblical, there's no need to repent or change. Sin is evil. I engage in evil when I sin. We can all look around and see things are getting harder, whether it's financial, political, social, or even natural weather events. But what do we see when we look at this spiritual? Do we even look for the spiritual? Or do we pass things off and make them political and social issues or even natural phenomena? I can honestly say that I do not know what the future holds. And I sure don't know what God has planned for your future and your life. But what I'm feeling from him lately is the same message, but not from my dad to my brothers and I, but from our Heavenly Father to my Christian brothers and sisters and I. It's time we get serious. It's time we grow a bit more. It's time we start thinking about others rather than our own little 3-foot bubble around us. What makes you and I so different than the thousands who have died in faith throughout history is a question worth pondering. We are blessed to live in a country where we have religious freedom. We as Christians aren't being persecuted in droves in the U.S. And to those that are being persecuted, we should be praying that first, God's will be done in their lives and circumstances, and secondly, that they gain strength, guidance, and wisdom from Him to endure, just as we should do for anyone else in any other country. But I am also afraid that the tide is turning here in the States. It is important that we not get trapped into a right versus left response, but a biblical response. That may be a very uncomfortable place to stand, but it's the right place to stand. We either stand with God or we stand against God. There is no middle ground. There is no reason to fear. If we stand with Him, He will stand with us. Wherefore take you on unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Ephesians 6:13. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice, and open the door, I will come in to him, and will sup with him, and he with me. To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I also overcame, and am sat down with my Father in his throne. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. Revelation 3:20-22. My brothers and I still cut up and give each other grief every chance we get. I can honestly say that God has blessed us with wonderful wives who have for the most part learned to accept it and even at times laugh about it. My hope is that we have learned what Dad was trying to teach us that day on the roof.
Hey Lee, that was a really interesting pod that you wrote, and I think one very, very important one for today's time. You know, I was talking to someone just not too long ago, and they were talking about the kids today. One was an SOR officer who was in school, and they said they're just totally rebellious, in a lot of ways. I think what I was telling you guys on the roof was it's time to grow up. It's time to grow up and see things from a different perspective. I love playing. I love jokes. I love practical jokes. I love that. But it's like in Ecclesiastes, to everything there's a season and a time for every purpose under the heaven. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to ask you a question because I believe a reason a lot of people, including Christians, refuse to grow up. They're like, no, I'm Jesus' little lamb, and they always want to keep that aspect going. But when you grow up and take responsibility, does that mean that you become mega serious, mega sour, that you don't have any fun anymore, that you don't enjoy life anymore because growing up is just too serious?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that what you get serious about is your beliefs and what God has called you to do. But as far as day-to-day life, and I hope that you can incorporate your beliefs and your calling into your day-to-day life, or it wouldn't be a calling if you can't incorporate it. Mm-hmm. But along every day is you know, I mean, we all have kids. We always joke with the nieces and nephews, and we do crazy things sometimes. And you know, I think that, you know, there's that lighter side of life, but yet there's the other side is that, you know, there's a time and a purpose, like you said in Ecclesiastes, for everything. But I don't think Christ was always, you know, driving them out with a whip at the temple. You know, I think he was a very purposeful person in what he did, and he was a very appropriate person. And I think he would deal with things appropriately with who he was dealing with. A lot of times would be basically who he's dealing with. And I think, you know, being brothers and having kids and things like that, yeah, there's a lot of play that goes along with that. But I think a lot of it is, you know, it's time that we're also appropriate in how we teach our kids. You know.
Well, let me ask you a question, Lee. You're an engineer. graduated with your engineering degree. And you have a young son. I say young; he's turning 14 next, right?
Demolition expert.
Yeah. And so my question is, when he was 6 years old, he probably saw you working on the skill saw and cutting things, and he's like, "Yeah, I want to do it." But as I imagine, I know you're extremely responsible. You didn't let him do it,
No.
okay? And it's because, and you were thinking, someday, dude, when you mature, you get to do the big stuff.
Yeah.
I see a lot of Christians who seemingly think they're the object of God's total purpose. They are the object of God's total affection. They're the object of God's total reason for coming. And they think that they're like a babe in the manger, and they don't want to crawl out of the manger. They don't want to grow up. They don't want to assume responsibility.
Yeah, so I have a daughter and I have a son, and completely different. I did not start Eli with the skill saw, but I started him with a drill, and he could drill. I remember the day we were working, and he's like, "Yeah, I can do that." And it was something that really didn't make a difference on. So I was like, "Hey, yeah," and I stood with him and I helped him, and he was good, and he enjoyed it so much. And then I think what you're talking about is, I think a lot of times people are they think they're God's master craftsman or masterpiece. That's that way. Sometimes I have to get on to my daughter because she walks into the room and she thinks she's all that, and I'm like, wait a minute, let's put you back in your place, because you're not always that. I think that we've got to figure out that God's not done working with us, and each day that we've got to grow, and it's not that He created us to He did. I do believe He created us to be something and someone. There's a reason and a individual specificity for each and every one of us, but I think you got to earn it and grow through it. And I think that that's part of that maturing process, and don't just yes, on one hand we can expect that because we know God has done that, but doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be an engineer and say, okay, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to design skyscrapers without getting all the foundation of going through all the school to do it first, because it's probably like going to kindergarten class when they do it with popsicle sticks. It's all going to fall and break and crumble.
Yeah. I watch you and Eli at dinner sometime, and I watch that y'all play back and forth with each other. And I think that's awesome, because that's a relationship of friendship you're bringing along with him, not just parent. Now, my question is this. At some point, someday, if he so chooses to, you'd like to work beside him, wouldn't you? If you choose to do the same thing you're doing, you'd like to work him as a partner, right?
For sure.
And you're both working together for the same thing. Now, let's just say that he chooses to never grow up.
That won't work.
Well,
I'll be fixing everything all the time.
Yeah.
He's the master of demolition.
and technically, he would be crazy and retarded. Retarded because he's old enough to do, but he chooses not to.
Yes.
And the other one is, I love the adage that says, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is insanity.
Yes.
So if your goal is to bring him along so someday he's working with you, same purpose, same idea, and working beside you, and you're not just observing him all the time, because like when you drill, you tried it out, you did good, okay, next tool. I think in terms of what you're saying, I hear you saying too, that maybe that's what Christ wants out of us, a friendship and someone who's working on the same goal and purpose he is, to work beside him. Not that we're always the project he's working on.
Right.
Okay? I think it's excellent if we can learn to do that. And I think the first thing to get to do it, we've got to take our mind off of ourselves instead of letting him go. Because I know that you don't mind at all taking your welder and saying, go ahead, Eli, see what you can do. Because you're a good, loving father who's going to say, step one, watch me. Step two, watch me. Step three, pick up after me. Step three, look at all the things around that it takes.
And part of that maturity that we do is sometimes he just does not focus. And which is also a sign of like, he's not mature enough yet. He's not ready for that step. And I think a lot of times in whether it's we read our Bibles or whatever things, there's a lot of times that I personally lose focus and don't do the same thing. So I'm the same with Christ. I'm in the same spot that my son is with me sometimes, and Christ is like, okay, you're not ready for that. You're not ready for that.
Yeah.
But you know what? At some point, I think we've got to stop and realize that how much time do we have to get ready for that?
Yeah, that we could be right here at an unpleasant time in history and still not be ready, and it's not God's obligation to get us ready at the last minute because we've never listened to it. Great. We'll have to come back and talk about that again. Write me another blog on how to be ready.
Okay.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate it much.
Hey y'all, thanks for joining us for Around the Supper Table. At Sanctuary Family Farms, we want to be real. Whether that's through our blogs, daily verses, or even Nana's recipes, we want to share the messages that God has laid on each of our hearts. If you liked what you heard today or want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook and YouTube at Sanctuary Family Farms or our website at www.sanctuaryfamilyfarms.com, where we share our recipes and blogs and sell farm fresh beef and pork. We can't wait for you to join us again for next week's episode.